So, our conference, the NATO Talk Conference, of course, the very title suggests that we also need to talk about NATO itself. We have the NATO-Ukraine Council, the anniversary is coming up, and in the following panel we are going to discuss events and what happened over the last year, lessons learned so far from the war in Ukraine, and how to integrate these lessons learned into NATO's future planning. So we are going to have a keynote speech and then Dr. Jana Puglierin from the Berlin office of the European Council on Foreign Relations is going to moderate the session, and Ambassador Dr. Géza Andreas von Geyr is going to give the introductory speech for this panel. Thank you for the invitation to this conference. I'm very glad to be here. And I can finally talk about NATO and let you know more about NATO, advertise NATO, although you're all familiar basically with the organization. I remember it's not too long ago when in the Foreign Office people made a joke. Basically, if there's a NATO post out there, you send a historian. Well, I'm NATO ambassador. I am a historian, but I hope that this was not the reason I was sent and posted to Brussels. I would like to talk about 4 basic points. The current challenges which the alliance is facing. Then I'm going to talk about the transformation process. The third set of remarks will be on the Washington summit in the coming summer, how to make it successful, and then a few remarks on basic questions. Okay, first point, the challenges which NATO is facing. And we, the permanent representatives in the NATO Council, have our top 5 topics. The most important from NATO's point of view is Russia. Russia as a threat, as a danger. This is topic number 1 and will remain so. Also, because Russia has an interest in fueling as many crises as possible all around the world. NATO is not active as NATO, but all NATO states support Ukraine, or as good as all. And accession to NATO, that's a question which has come up a while ago, and we have the answer. Yes, NATO can become, Ukraine can become a NATO member. And I used to be an ambassador to Moscow, and let me tell you something about this. There was an exhibition on the Red Square after the beginning of the war when old military equipment was displayed under the title 1941 equals 2022. The Russian narrative is the country needs to defend itself against the US, against NATO, against the Allies. This is the Russian narrative. The second subject was just under discussion, Israel and all the questions about security in the region. I would like to add one small thing. NATO still has a training mission going on in Iraq, or rather it's an advisory mission. So in that regard, the alliance is active in the region. What the alliance needs to do is basically face the two big challenges at the same time, analytically and as far as the threat perception is concerned. The third subject, the Western Balkans, Kosovo. The region is far from stable. 30 years after the war, there's no stability. So in the wake of the other two large conflicts, violence starts erupting in the north of Kosovo. Bosnia and Herzegovina is still a very unstable country. We are far removed from stability in the region, still. And topic number 4. All these incidents happening in the Baltic Sea, damage done to critical infrastructure, meant to hurt the people in the states located around the Baltic Sea and the alliance as a whole. And then, of course, there are still China, Beijing. Asymmetry was mentioned. So China's hybrid activities spreading out to the Atlantic area. Very worrying. In an interview at the end of last year, a very experienced politician said the largest challenge in the future will be the growing uncertainty about information. You never know what you get. Is it true? To what degree? Completely or not? And this is relevant for strategic communications. This is relevant to NATO. Then the transformation process of 31, soon 32 members. I hope it's just a couple of days until Sweden joins and their flag will be put up next to the Turkish flag. Transformation, deterrence, defense have moved to the focus of our discussions. Russia, terrorism, but still our attention needs to be based on a 360-degree approach. Let me just give you some brief concepts, new structures, new type of how to lead, new material, new personnel, and all of this is complicated. So NATO's transformation is about all these subjects. It includes modernization, being able to face the challenges of the future, which includes artificial intelligence, quantum computing, cyberspace, space. Let's take the example of drones. You need to keep up to date on current technology. So this should not only mean that we concentrate on the latest developments in drone manufacture, but also into the on the mass-made products which are used in the war against Ukraine. And then a few words on the upcoming summit in Washington. Subject number 1 is coherence of the alliance. Coherence means 32 democracies pulling on one string. It does not mean unanimity, but the alliance needs to discuss all relevant topics in detail. And the situation in each of these 32 countries are different. Still, they need to achieve a consensus which can then be put into practice. So coherence. That's the most important thing. Then, to pursue a common goal, to finally reach the 2% target. And in the meantime, all members have increased their defense spending. And again, on transformation in the context of the next NATO summit. The arms industry had been somewhat neglected, but this is definitely going to change and will have to. Then, partnerships. Let me mention, first of all, the European Union, the Atlantic European coexistence, and there is a lot of potential in this cooperation. However, there are still obstacles to better cooperation between NATO and EU, and we have to get rid of those. We can no longer afford to have these obstacles. And then the foundation of NATO's policy, also being discussed here in Germany. The alliance, at its 75th anniversary, can look back on 75 years of success, because peace, freedom, and security go hand in hand. We will also then discuss fundamental things such as absolute reliability, for instance, in burden sharing. burden sharing, I'm talking about money here, finances, the 2% I just mentioned, but it also includes the readiness to actually carry and share all burdens. And that includes being capable of fighting. And we need to understand how everything is interlinked and interconnected. Secure said a while ago that the partners of the alliance are so interlinked militarily with each other that deficits in the structure of one partner will have an effect on all others. And at the same time, there is a second dimension of this connectedness. This is the fact that there is no longer a dividing line between domestic security and resilience and international resilience. So domestic and foreign policy become more and more intertwined. So in view of the challenges which NATO is facing today, we can say the alliance has become more important than ever. It can do a lot for our security, but we have to make it strong. Thank you so much, Ambassador. I'm Jana Puglierin. I'm a member of the board of the German Atlantic Association. Claudia, Florence, please take your seats up here. Now, let us go into more detail. During this panel discussion, let me introduce Lieutenant General Markus Laubenthal, Deputy Inspector General of the Bundeswehr. Welcome to our conference. Next to me, my colleague Florence Gaub, Director of the Research Division at the NATO Defense College. Another dear colleague of mine, Claudia Major, she works for the Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik in the Department for Security Affairs, and Ambassador von Geyr will also participate in our panel discussion. General, we have just heard about the new defense planning, the new structure of NATO, so quite demanding, quite a task for Germany to achieve the goals formulated here. Could you maybe go into more detail on what to expect from the German perspective? So, what we have learned during the Cold War, well, there are a few lessons learned, but we have to adapt to the new challenges. And we in Germany are located geographically right in the middle. One third of the Bundeswehr will be prepared in a way that they can be integrated into NATO forces. We've gained some experience during international crisis. We used to be talking about 10,000 troops, but now we're up to 20,000 plus the Navy, plus the Air Force. So we have all the capabilities, but we cannot really go into depth, so to say. This is why we have this one-off special fund. We need like new rocket defense systems, new submarines. So we were granted this fund and will, by the end of the year, have met about 2/3 of the goals we wanted to be achieved. It is important that all countries put resources at NATO's disposal and at shape. The decision will be made on who is going to contribute what and what it will be used for. So the decisions go to the 2025 horizon, so each nation will know which criteria to fulfill. For instance, we heard about the brigade permanently stationed in Lithuania. And sometimes it seems that the media put you under too much pressure, because this does take some time. Costs are high, but everything needs to happen quickly. So are you positive that we will be able to fulfill the commitments in the case of the divisions you mentioned? Yes, I'm positive, because that's only 1/3 of our contributions, but we will need to modernize ships, we need to modernize the Air Force and make it readily deployable. And Germany will have to be able to meet all demands. These 100 billion, that's a real booster. We haven't had any such thing for a long, long time. Now we are working at high speed, but it's not sufficient to turn the Bundeswehr into an all-in. But we will be an excellent partner for NATO. We can contribute additional value. We have 3 divisions which we can make ready, but they also need to be supported. They need ammunition, they need logistics, and that means that annually we will have to hold exercises from the Baltic Sea down to the Black Sea, also be active in the Pacific in order to work our way up to fulfilling our commitments. These forces have to be deployed within 30 days, and we need to make this visible to everyone. And this is what we are trying to achieve. We will have a second round with further questions for you, but now let's move to Claudia Major. Claudia, a while ago, Before the summit in Vilnius, you wrote a text, Permanent Security or Long-Term Security for Ukraine, which security assurances can be made, and you and your co-author expressed a positive view on Ukraine's future in NATO. Is this already an accession assurance, or is this more of an empty promise? The NATO communique is the result of what NATO members had agreed upon. I would have loved more clarity in it, because the question whether Ukraine will become a member, that was not the question under discussion. We rather expected a time schedule, because Ukraine has been in a kind of gray zone since 2008. Back then, some kind of promise was made, but not very detailed. It was just mentioned. And since Vilnius, things have become somewhat more clear. Ukraine's future is in NATO, but the communique also reads that the real invitation will only be made once the members have agreed on it, and the members haven't agreed on that yet. So I'm not quite happy with the result of the communique. But Vilnius was not only about NATO. There was another communique, the G7 communique, and they tried to bridge the current situation and the accession NATO of Ukraine into NATO, which involved also more support, also economic support for Ukraine. Ukraine is also already receiving support, but that's a difference from being under a certain defense guarantee. Members can count on others to defend them. This is something that Ukraine cannot count upon yet. So we have the NATO-Ukraine Council, and now the issue is to make decisions which will pave the way for NATO, Ukraine's NATO membership. We should not make any decision which might postpone that. And why should Ukraine join NATO? Because it can contribute a lot, not because it's asking for alms or a donation. NATO will be much more stable with Ukraine inside than Ukraine outside. Another thing, EU accession, training of Ukrainian armed forces after their, I hope so, victory in this war, and 2 more sentences about the 2% clause. That's just the baseline. That's the absolute minimum we need. So we shouldn't be too proud because we contribute 2% only. That's the minimum. And in the long-term planning, this is not yet reflected. So defense spending has been increased very little. The big booster is the special one-off fund, but in the long term, if we want to maintain this 2% expenditure, we will have to increase the defense budget by 30 billion. I love miracles, by the way. Or we have to create another one-off fund. So we need so much more equipment, new helicopters, submarines, this and that. And if we buy all this, if we want to have more troops, train them, equip them, then this is going to cost a lot more than 2% of our GDP.
And that's not the case. The amount we mentioned is just the initial fund, and it's not for longer term. Talking about longer term solutions, I would like to come back to the issue of Ukrainian membership in NATO. There are two theories. One of them says that once Ukraine is a NATO member, then it will be a deterrence. But then some say that if it's the case, it would be an invitation for Putin to test our resolve. So, what happens if Putin would try to test our resolve? For example, you mean that NATO, Ukrainian membership in NATO would be an invitation for Putin to test our resolve? The membership of Ukraine in NATO will be successful only if Ukraine is ready, but also if NATO is ready. It's a little bit vague, but what do I mean by this? It's the question of territorial integrity, that the countries with territorial conflicts cannot be adopted into NATO. And of course, basically, it's the veto right of Russia. We second timing, and during the war, Ukraine cannot become a member, but after the war, if the situation continues, and Russia still will have a veto, and we should change this. And we see that to adopt a new member is very difficult, is becoming more difficult, and we see it on the example of Sweden. The political unity is very important. The NATO is credible only if we support each other, and as Trump says, that we are all like in a club that is in a quarrel. Of course, coming back to the example of Sweden, it can't continue like this. And first, second, we have in Article 5, yes or no. There is no qualified membership, and if a member becomes a member, it should be protected, but it can be but it is possible only if Ukraine is fully integrated in our structures, and if we are ready to protect it, and we know what is the role of the United States, what are the European capabilities without the United States, and this is a huge task which we must fulfill. Of course, I see whole risks. I don't say that it's simple, but from the strategic point of view, it's better to ask what is the situation is better. Ukraine as a NATO member, or Ukraine occupied by Russia. I think it's in interest. It's our interest that Ukraine will have this outlook, this perspective. Then, without it, we mentioned the elections in the United States. We can assume that there will be some shifts in priorities, that some American presidents wanted to shift the priorities in the Pacific region, and so, in your opinion, does it mean for Europeans, for the European dimension in NATO, how should we react to this shift? I have been working in the European Union, and recently I came back to NATO. I have worked in both organizations, and the question of strategic sovereignty is the answer to your question. So the question is, what should we do if what happens if from the military point of view, will Europe be able to define itself from the military point of view, and if we think that if we just pose this question, then one was described as anti-American, and but it's not an anti-American, it's just a European task, because we didn't do it since 1990s, because we imagined a new world, a beautiful new world, the peace dividend, and so on and so on. And the answer is, of course, in best case, for example, Trump will be re-elected, and or he will not be re-elected, and we will remain transatlantic friends. I assume that I'm not an expert in this field, but regardless of all doctrines, Marine Corps, and longer term, America is thinking more about Pacific, and I was in the United States many years back, and I heard there this position that Russia is a European problem. The situation in Ukraine changed this a little bit, but I think it's wishful thinking that it will be different. So, what does it mean in specific the United States focusing on in the Pacific space from strategic point of view? So, if there are more and more Americans who believe that Europeans should assume more responsibility, and so what would be the role of Europeans, their own defense? What would be the role in case of this shift? Of course, I would say that Europeans are responsible for Europe from the territorial point of view, but I think that it's a high time to get rid of this territorial thinking. We know about the development of the cyberspace. NATO is not only a treaty, the people just think it is, so it's a division of labor, not based on geography. We do Asia, you do Europe, and so on. Specialization, pooling and sharing, a famous slogan. But if we think about the future, then I think it's the best option for all of us. Thank you. Ambassador, coming back to your past, before you were in Russia, you were active in the European Union. developing the European defense capabilities. So talking about cooperation between the European Union and NATO, what could be done, what could be improved there? We are talking about capabilities, developing of new capabilities. So how can we support each other? Is there a potential in your view? I would start by saying that there are three dimensions in which Europe has been developing. Once as part of NATO, as the European Union, and third, the various bilateral, trilateral configurations in the field of security policy, and it's always the same Europeans. And here I wouldn't talk about a formal cooperation between NATO and the European Union. But we could go to a different level. Many Europeans, like such initiatives like air defense systems on the ground, and there are many projects and they are implemented which strengthen Europeans and the European role in NATO. What can be done by European Union? In European Union, we have the principle. We don't stick to this principle of unanimous coordination, and here we can do a lot. For example, we can establish troops. We can make arrangements, and then. Outside NATO and European Union structures, there are many fields of bilateral cooperation, in Benelux, for example. So we European, and on principle, it's a matter of principle, and here you are right, we should assume more responsibilities regardless of how the next elections in the United States will be, what would be the result. We should do more and we should invest more. Talking about Ukraine again. Ukraine has an outlook to become not only a NATO member, but a member of the European Union. And it's incredible that at this speed at which it's happening, it's a big acknowledgement to the future of Ukraine as part of Euro-Atlantic structures, and it's a lot. And if we take into consideration what kind of support we have been providing for Ukraine, 24 billion euros from Germany alone, it's a big acknowledgement towards Ukraine as the future part of Euro-Atlantic structures. Thank you. If you would like to make a comment, you could give me a sign. General, I have a question for you concerning the war against Ukraine. What kind of lessons can we draw from this war, also including the structuring, the development of NATO? There is a famous saying about getting ready for past wars. More tanks, more drones, or both. insufficient numbers both, and as Ambassador said, this conventional warfare, like in the Cold War, on one hand, but at the same time a lot of innovations on the part of Ukrainian armed forces with the use of drones, electronic warfare, and with apps on smartphones. And I just came back from the United States. I talked to my colleagues, and multidimensional operations is a buzzword. I don't know if we can talk about revolution in the military affairs, but there is a clear purpose, and NATO agrees with it, and we also. The big question is how to bundle all those things in order to retain our advantage, not on the whole battlefield, but punctually, so that we can gain an upper hand. This is the military lesson. And then, of course, we must preserve our conventional capabilities. I talked about modernization and airlift, and because before the war we didn't have enough. Our depots are not full, and if someone thought that this war would be over in 14 days, they were wrong, and also the not only because the Russian assumptions were wrong, but also thanks to the courageous resistance and preparation of Ukrainian armed forces. Also, thanks to the support of international community. It's as far as military lessons go. And of course, we should increase our resilience. Communication lines, whether it is pipeline or data cables which connect us, space, outer space, where many things happen, and we should be ready and monitor the situation. Also, it's dual use equipment, because it's all in outer space, and communication devices which are there. And in the last 20 to 25 years, we haven't done that because we didn't believe in that threat. You were not only in the United States, but in Nordic countries. So what can you say about their prospects? Finland is NATO member, Sweden is on the way to it. So what lessons can we learn from there? Military resilience, civilian resilience. Sweden and Finland, they are wide in front of us, and Sweden is a big country with a small population with very active armed forces, which rely significantly on their reserves, unlike us, because as we specialized on foreign missions, we didn't need so many reserves. And this is something we must replenish, and we can learn from them how to organize it, how to increase resilience of our population, and how to gain support of the population, so that the society and companies would support it, regardless of the arsenal. I think Finland has 2,000 cannons which were modernized, and we can learn a lot from that. And this potential, they make a contribution with these arsenals, with these arms, and their sea capabilities, the so-called brown water capabilities, is a big contribution. to NATO potential, and of course talking about our budget and budget draft. It must be, of course, be put on a respective financial footing. A researcher in our defense college, we are thinking about the future of the war, starting with the war between Germany and France in 1870, and one of the main conclusions is the overestimation of technologies and underestimations of the so-called human factor. And you mentioned Ukraine cognitive aspect, that Ukraine mobilized a lot. And what is our problem? Until now, we had a capitalist thinking about the war. Why should someone die for something bigger than oneself? Why should someone die for a team, for a unit? And it's something very different on the other side. And Finland is a country which is more future-oriented than any other European country. They have processes of thinking and rethinking on all levels, and which are projected on the all sectors of society. And previously, we talked a lot about the future. Now, after 2000, we don't think about the future. We just don't think about what is going, what we need now, today. And of course, we need some cognitive capabilities, not only among our military officers, politicians, but every one of us. So we receive more information in 1 week, maybe, than a peasant in the Middle Ages. We need to develop our capabilities to think faster, and it's a task for everyone, and as Germany. And here we have to do our homework. General, a footnote, of course, starting with terms. So, fitness for war, if we take it seriously, and I agree with it, we need to think strategically. We must be capable of talking about these notions, these ideas, and despite more than 600 days of war in our neighborhood, we are still too slow. Claudia, you have been dealing a lot with nuclear issues. You are heading a team. If you see the nuclear saber rattling of Russia, and the NATO dispositive is a reflected before the war, and it wasn't adapted. Our defense minister said today in the evening that the nuclear deterrent is working, and we are not intimidated by this nuclear saber rattling. So, what do you think about the nuclear deterrence, and if we need something to adapt in NATO? Maybe you can go discuss both of it. So, you mentioned that Ukraine has both the prospect of membership, both in NATO and the European Union, and there is a certain timeline that NATO membership goes before the membership in the European Union, because if Ukraine wants to develop democratically, privately, they need a security, they need a private investment, so this security of external framework will ensure the democratic and economic development and of course that's clear that the NATO membership should go before the EU membership. It's difficult, but it's quite clear, evident. The fitness for war consists of three aspects: armed forces, fully equipped, and we can. You said that we don't have too much. Now we have even less because we didn't replace what we gave to Ukraine. And it must be replenished. Capable armed forces, industry, we didn't discuss it in detail. We need an industry that can produce enough and where we can place orders. After the Russian aggression, the many orders came to the United States, but of course, if we would like to be more independent and to assume more responsibility, maybe European should be in position not only produce our weapons, but to develop them. So, first, armed forces, industry, and resilience of societies, not only in terms of our structures, infrastructure, but also mentally. And it means also the question of democracy that is capable of protecting itself, defending itself. If we take a look at these three tasks, we have a lot of work to do. Just in the former panel, the Israeli colleague said that what happened on the 7th of October, I couldn't have imagined that. So, talking about the future, what can we imagine in the future? The deployability, we overestimated the strength and the deployability of the Russian armed forces. But what we underestimated is the readiness of Russia to launch a war. If we take into consideration how much time Russia needed in order to make their armed forces ready for deployment, is just between 10 and 12 years. So if within 10 or 12 years we had a neighbor who was ready to start a war, we still have much work to do.
Okay, I'll keep it short. At the moment, Russia registers many conventional losses, not so much of the Air Force or Navy. So in the future, I think the nuclear perspective will become increasingly important. And the investments made into the nuclear forces continue, and the last conventions which had limited any nuclear aspirations are running out. What we see now is that exercises take place, and in order to remain capable, we need to be sure we also update our nuclear forces, because that adds to our capability to defend ourselves. One more question to the ambassador, then I'll take questions from the public. If you please move up to the microphone so I'll be able to see how many questions we'll have. Ambassador, I'm going to ask you a difficult question. In every discussion I had on security in Europe, what always gets mentioned is elections in the US, Biden, Trump, the swing states, and in most of those, except for one, Trump is leading. Is this being discussed in NATO? Maybe not openly, but behind closed doors? Does this have consequences for NATO? Is this a scenario that NATO members need to prepare for? Another term of Trumpism? Well, this is not really a subject on the agenda of the NATO Council. But it would be wrong if I now said no one ever mentions it. Everyone has their own scenario in their heads. But we have some experience. We can look back at Trump's last term when doing a summit in Brussels. He basically made a strong point and sent a wake-up call to everyone else. Okay, it happened. And based on this experience, I'd recommend that we Europeans try to become stronger and more independent because it's good for us. Let's not always stare and watch what's happening in the US. We need to take on more burden onto our shoulders. We, that's NATO, the European partners, that's also the European Union. Like ammunition, arms industry, cooperation, EU, NATO. So the Europeans should become stronger. They should have started yesterday. At least today. Tomorrow is going to be too late. And independently of how the next US elections go. Because the pivot to Asia is nothing that Trump had invented. That was his predecessor. And so it makes sense from a US point of view. Certain regions in the world might represent a threat scenario, a threat to the US. So we Europeans need to do more and become stronger in any case. But Europeans have not really understood this yet, because overnight we can end up in a completely different situation under a worst-case scenario. If, say, we in Europe need to defend ourselves without support from the US. Now, please, I'm looking forward to your questions. Ladies first, a good tradition. Please introduce yourselves briefly and then ask your question. Wiebke Köhler, FDP Hamburg. My question goes to General Laubenthal, but also to the ambassador. The headline would be defense capability in Europe. Well, it seems for Germany it's still difficult to acknowledge that times have indeed changed. And Dr. Major, you mentioned that this 100 billion fund will see us through to 27. What about other NATO members? Are they spending more, doing more than we are? And in NATO itself, the US plays a dominating role. And if Americans are basically more active or will be more active in the Indo-Pacific, don't we need a EU command and control structure? Hermann Bovitz, let me return to a subject we have already mentioned this morning. I'm a member of this old generation. We back then still had conscription and large forces, homeland defense, as we would put it today, was seen as a task we needed to fulfill. But the minister said our attitude had changed and now we need to change it back. So our future capability to defend ourselves tomorrow, what will that entail? What does that mean? Reinhard Wieser, member of the Reserve Association. I read loyal. There are many comradeships of reservists in Germany, and so my question goes to General Laubenthal. So conscription has been suspended, that's a fact, but which role are the reservists going to play? So maybe being a member of the reserve, doing telework, would that be kind of an option? Do we need to change any laws for that? Because someone should be able to take their equipment back home. Then the question on equipment. So the question goes to Dr. Major. What is the German population's view on nuclear weapons? And what does this mean for the young generation? What do statistics tell us? Well, there are only 8 types of university study that deal with nuclear arms, but we have more than 100 concentrating on gender issues. Does that help for our future defense? I'm not sure exactly that these need to be competing areas. Let me say this, as a woman active in defense policy. And this morning, Claudia, you weren't here yet, but the minister said there is no such thing as war studies in Germany. Should we introduce such studies at university level? And how can we make the reserve more attractive? But, General, there's one more question for you from the chat. Ralf Klevin von Fintel asks, let's go back to the German brigade for Lithuania, permanently stationed. What will be the effect of this from the personnel point of view on the other brigades? Do we need new force generation, new equipment for the remaining brigades, or will there is some concern, it seems, that the Lithuania brigade will kind of consume too many assets? Okay, let me start by answering the question about this brigade. So we are setting up a strong combat brigade in Lithuania. Resources come from the Bundeswehr fund. because the brigade needs to be attractive. It needs to be tier 1, that means deployable within 10 days, and will have everything it needs in Lithuania, including logistics, ammunition, and all these issues that we were lacking. They will be there in Lithuania. For us, that's new territory. And this brigade is kind of a beacon of the Zeitenwende, because all other nations in EFP, the Brits, the Canadians, I was with US Army Wiesbaden, and I know that the Americans are devoted to defending Europe, irrelevant of who will be the next president. And now that things are picking up pace in Europe, this will send a convincing signal to the US. All nations have increased their defense budgets, so more things will become possible in the future. I will not go into detail about who will be spending exactly how much and what will they spend it on. It's not that we in Germany are pioneers, but we are sending a strong signal. And this is the message I took home from my last visit to Washington. So the brigade in Lithuania will be a beacon. The reserve system, you're interested? Welcome. Why not join? Those 203,300 active force members, well, we need more troops. We need more personnel, so we need to make the job more attractive and give young men and women an opportunity to join the armed forces if they're interested. And we need to react more quickly with our response to applications. There are also young people who have never even thought of ever serving in the armed forces, but now they're over 25 and they wish to make an active contribution. They would like to join the Bundeswehr. And this is a great source for troop generations. We have trained the first 1,000. We could do better, but we are on the right way. So the motivation is high, and this will create more resilience. Why not telework? Okay, it depends. Whenever you can make a contribution. Well, doing combat from home might be somewhat difficult, but say provide IT. Why not? We can think about it, because the equipment is there. Claudia, a question was asked. Nuclear IQ. How much do we know about it? Heiko Brendel asks, what about the European NATO members? Should they decouple from the US also in terms of nuclear weapons? So will that mean for Germany to build its own nuclear capabilities? So maybe you could integrate that into what you're going to say on the nuclear IQ. I'm sounding like a spoiler because I might sound like I'm criticizing too much. That's not my intent, because a lot has been achieved in Germany, in Europe. But we need to see it in a larger context. Israel was able to mobilize over 300,000 reservists within 48 hours. Now, would that be possible in Germany? 3 million in the reserve? Could they be? Okay. It's doable. I wanted to leave the question open and be diplomatic about it. Now, defense spending. In 2014, NATO members promised to increase their defense budgets up to 10% of the GDP. Now it's the baseline. More than half of those 31 aren't able to make it. Finland will be. And many NATO members are not spending 2%, and they're not even trying to. Take a closer look at how European states react, their defense spending, their support for Ukraine, their behavior within the alliance. Those that have increased their budgets are those geographically more close to Russia, Baltic states, Nordic states, Poland. Those are the states that historically have made bad experiences with Russia, that feel threatened. But the further you move away from this region, the smaller the increases in defense budgets. So I'm not particularly optimistic as far as defense spending is concerned. As far as I remember, Trump won. After Biden got elected, everyone said, thanks God, he's out of the picture. Originally, we in Europe had intended to be capable of defending ourselves, even maybe without the Americans. But once Trump was gone, that was off the table. We should have started yesterday. We should have started with Biden as president, when he became president. So are we able to make fundamental decisions without any crisis happens? Russia's attack on Ukraine was was a disaster, something completely unexpected. If there's no urgency, will we still be able to do something? Modernize our armed forces? Increase our spending? Or to put it the other way around, does it have to get any more urgent? Because it seems like the situation as we have it now is still not enough. We don't need to discuss gender, everything's said. So we're running out of time, so let's keep it short. Herr von Geyr, what answer would you give to this question about nuclear weapons, nuclear forces? I did not want to evade that question. Okay, I'm going to say something about this issue. There are very good reasons why NATO never made any nuclear subject a subject of great public debate. At the beginning of the war against Ukraine, or even the day before, when Putin gave this speech, we realized that there was now a head of state painting a gloomy picture with some nuclear elements in it. And interestingly, it was China which put a stop to it. And the protective shield offered by the US with its nuclear component. So we should adhere to the coalition treaty and what will be part of, hopefully, the next coalition treaty, that we will remain true to our obligations. The Bundeswehr will, other countries will too, and that's all which needs to be said on this. Another issue that was mentioned was the required change in mentality. I read something the other day, don't remember who it was, and that person said, during COVID, we started listening to experts, health experts. And now we have a drastic international situation. And again, we should listen to experts, experts on security. In order to be able to listen to them, we need them. We have a few here at this table, but we need more of them. We need a public discussion on security. That goes without saying. There are a handful, not many universities that offer studies on security issues. So we need to integrate this into our teaching. And then another thing which got mentioned, set up European leadership structures. No, I don't think so. We do not need any duplication. That's not helpful. We have SHAPE, we have NATO command structures, which get modernized, restructures, made fit for the future. That's enough. They're good enough. We can use them. We should use them. We have the Berlin Plus agreement in place, and I think Althea is the mission led by SHAPE, right? If I remember correctly. So the military aspects of that mission are part of a NATO structure. That's good for Europe. We have a structure in place. Why not use it? So NATO can do other things and do things differently from the EU. And a last remark. This 2%. Okay, in Vilnius, it was said that's the minimum, the required minimum, but this 100 billion, this one-off fund, it's one-off, but it's huge. It's an enormous amount of money. And it's a great achievement to make this money available. And now it needs to be used, spent. We need contracts, and our political leadership said that the 2% obligation will be upheld. That's not ridiculous. It will be throughout this legislative term, so that's a good start. And I know from the NATO Council that this is worth a lot and means a lot to our NATO partners. And we will be held responsible to keeping that promise. May I add something? Let me say something from the French point of view. The Germans mention French and British nuclear weapons which might be used, and they don't even ask the Brits or the French about it. Sometimes I read articles and I ask myself, did anyone ever call a colleague in Paris and ask them, maybe use your nuclear weapons just in case? Will we have access to them? Okay, so far so good. 4 final questions in 3 minutes 42 seconds. So keep it short. Deutsche Landesgesellschaft for Security Policy. One of the latest demands made by Erdogan concerning Sweden's accession, Sweden must advocate Turkey's membership in the EU. And the Swedish foreign minister complied, and the Turkish ambassador was present, so Sweden is taking that very seriously. But so is Turkey a loose gun and Erdogan a troublemaker? So you asked about Turkey's role as a troublemaker? Okay. It's like speed dating now. Sciences Po, Paris. So Germany is going to withdraw from a European Union defense policy project. So next question. Katrin Bastian, George Marshall Center. Ambassador, I can't imagine that for Turkey it will be easier to accept Ukraine into NATO than, say, Sweden or Finland. How do you see this? Okay, now Turkey. Last question goes to the lady, but mine is very important, so let's do both. Very short. I'm back from a visit. I taught at an elite university in China, international management, and Ms. Gaub said, we have a lack in strategic capabilities. That's my conclusion, I think. Question. What do we need to do in our education policy, and how can we solve this problem? We can learn from you, because the military have a lot of experience with making strategic decisions available. Another aspect, defense capability, won't work without financial markets and financing. So we had this social governance thing, and I think defense spending was black painted. So I would ask you, you are in a position to make this subject more visible. So this was not basically a question, but an appeal.
Florence.
China, future capabilities, Florence und General and Miss Major governance and European attempt to leadership. Yes, no, no, yes. But now in more detail. Turkey. NATO is both a political and military alliance. Turkey is an important NATO member. This must be stressed. This is a military alliance, and that's why the question of the EU membership, what was discussed between the Turkish president and Sweden, the question of the membership should be resolved in the European Union, but in NATO. And because a political and military alliance should have a military feature, both in decision-making and in its structure. Then the question of the Ukrainian membership, whether it would be more difficult or easier for Turkey, it will be decided upon based on military criteria. But once again, Turkey is a very important member of NATO, and Turkey is a very difficult neighborhood from the geopolitical point of view right now, and we should take this into consideration. Then, General, microphone. It's a very important project. Industry in Europe and both nations are interested to complete this, to be successful, but national interests of both countries must be maintained and considered. The project is difficult and it affects also other projects, but in order to be successful, these criteria must be preserved. ECFR, besides main ground combat system, a ground system, if they fail, it's not only a military problem, it's a political problem, because future combat air system is not. When Macron and Merkel started it, the purpose was European autonomy in the field of military industry. Then no one has interest to change the current nuclear system, both NATO and other country, because no one has an interest to change it. And Laura, I agree with you. The French stress it again and again. Of course, we should that we would have less stability and less unity if this theme is raised again and again, during summer, during the summer lull. European leadership is a question. Okay, no European leadership. So the future, maybe, and final remarks. There is no European claim for leadership. Maybe in the future, but no one raises this claim. Specific ideas. We are in the very beginning that the Federal Chancellery strategic thinking. Of course, we should start at the highest level. I wished that we should have such a committee in our parliament, not a strategy, maybe a structure that would think about such aspects. Now we should talk more about our future in schools. We talk more in schools about history and Latin in order to be able to cope with future problems. And annual report in the United States, there is a 4-year report of CIA concerning the future, and our service B&D would provide such a report as well in order to set new accents. The panel showed once again that NATO is pivotal for our security, but we should do our homework, and I wished that we all would continue our work in this spirit, also those who are present in this room. Thank you, Dr. Jana Puglierin. Now we have a coffee break. I ask you to be here at 4 o'clock for the last panel and the outlook into the future. Thank you.